the first time the sun's been out in 5 days or more. I get a week off of work between Christmas and New Year's every year, and for the last 3 years, I've utilized that vacation time to rent this Dyna SC-16 Firewood processor. I'm going to talk about what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and show you how much wood I got processed with it in that amount of time. But for now, I got to clean up the mess from 8 hours of usage on this thing. So stick around if you want to see how it works.
Dig Drive DIY!
We heat our house, 3-car garage, and large workshop with an outdoor wood-fired boiler. Depending on the winter, we can expect to use 15 to 16 cords of wood. In order to generate that amount of firewood, you need to be able to do one of two things. You can either cut and handle lots of small batches of wood over long periods of time throughout the year, or you need to work with large volumes of wood over shorter periods of time. And for the last several years, I've been trying to work the high volume, lower time model. I spent several weekends this past year hauling logs off of a couple big land clearing projects, and I stockpiled them at a friend's house in anticipation of renting this firewood processor between Christmas and New Year's. The 8-hour rental costs about $550, but fortunately, they go off of the hour meter, and they gave me the entire week to use it up. I have more than enough logs, and the goal is just to run as many as I possibly can through this thing in my 8-hour window. And for me, those 8-hour meter hours takes roughly 4 days to use up. I know, it sounds incredibly inefficient, right? 4 days to get 8 hours? But just let me explain. I spend this day alone. The rental place is over an hour from home. By the time I get there and get hooked up and get back, it's nearly 11 a.m. I can spend the rest of the afternoon then getting things set up by myself. The idea is that I want to limit the amount of time and days that I ask other folks to help me, so I do what I can by myself to get prepped, so when help arrives, it's all go time. Production and efficiency, right? Right. The Dyna processor is really easy to set up and get ready. You got to figure out where to put it so that you can load the truck with the elevator and feed the log table with the excavator in our case, and catch the sawdust with a little trailer like I'm going to use. It's about 2 o'clock at this point, and I've already noticed a little issue in the wood yard that is going to hold us up when we go into full production mode, so I'm just going to get it taken care of now. Somebody went and dumped a big pile of rocks in front of my big pile of logs, so in order to speed things up for tomorrow, and we're wanting to really get a lot of processing done, I'm going to move some of these rocks here today, get them out of the way maybe. At 4 o'clock, I've got about an hour of daylight left to give the splitter a trial run and make sure everything is looking good. Here are all the controls. It's really nice, straightforward. You got the splitter, forwards and backwards, runs the ram in and out. This runs your deck forward and back, and then also the wedge up and down, the splitting wedge. And then this runs all the controls for your log movement. So this is log forwards and backwards, and this is the saw clamp up and down. So this is what's going to run the saw, I believe. Little control panel here, we'll just start it up and we'll get this thing set up. Alright, so no real issues to speak of, and I quickly had a small load on the truck, and I would need to get that stacked up tonight yet so that the truck would be empty again for in the morning. You know, big production day. So day one went by in the blink of an eye, but now I should be ready for my crew of family volunteers that I've got lined up for work on day two. Hopefully it doesn't rain, and then maybe we can get most of those remaining rental hours all used up. My dad is always more than willing to lend a hand. I couldn't have burned wood all these years at home without him. He would serve as my main processor operator when I was running around doing other things. My father-in-law Rick is much the same, always willing to help and lends whatever I need to the process. He'll be operating his own mini excavator to feed the log table, and of course he'll jump in and out to address any issues with the logs. You got to make sure those logs are straight and free of any defects. Brother-in-law Caleb is the actual tree expert of the group. I'm lucky to have his expertise and impressive collection of tools on site to help with the task at hand. I know Caleb will be doing whatever needs done regardless of what I ask him to help with. He's the type that just sees a need for something and jumps into action before there's actually a problem. So you'll see him all over this work site. And my dad's brother, Uncle Kenny. He doesn't really have any skin in the game, but he keeps coming back year after year just to lend a hand. He'll be running our friend's John Deere skid loader that belongs here at the Woodyard property. So Caleb brought his dump trailer to put into our haul rotation for the 5-minute trip back to our house where we would be dumping the processed firewood. We would then alternate between his trailer and my dump truck so that we could keep the processor running the entire time. The weather, while not perfect, it wasn't raining yet, and so we were off to a heck of a good start. William lives right there. This is how many times have you done this for me?
It's my third time.
Third time? Okay. Well, don't expect like McDonald's wages here.
I mean, McDonald's is paying pretty well.
I know, that's what I say. We're going to leave you to this, and then we're going to go get another load. Caleb and I got back to the woodyard after dumping that first load, and the retired guys had discovered a problem. You sure that some of that's not water?
Nope. That was my first thought, but then I got to thinking, because it's so clear, usually hydraulics got some color to it.
Rick spotted a pretty major hydraulic oil leak, and it was likely going to shut us down for the rest of the day. And depending what it is, we might be down for the rest of the week. It's leaking right here.
Well, that's what we thought, but it's tight.
Did you try tightening that?
Yeah, put a wrench to it.
On the big part against the block?
No,
I didn't try the block.
no, just the fitting.
It's tight.
I bet the O-ring's leaking.
Looking out of this port on the block, and I don't know if it's the O-ring or the block is cracked, but we're going to take this off and see if we can address it.
Yep.
Maybe. There.
Which?
Getting it diverted to where it needs to be. If somebody wanted to reach in there and put their thumb on this, it would hold a lot of oil out.
Gets it down below it, huh?
Now, if we had... O-ring's bad. We're in the shop looking for pieces and parts. I think this is what it is that's leaking. This threads into that block, and this is a... That's about what it looks like. We'll take that. We'll take that in case it's smaller, but...
Leave it lay for now.
Just leave it lay for now. See that bad spot right there?
Oh boy.
See where that's bad?
That's shot. Yep.
So we're gonna try this.
It's got a.
Well, I think that's a go. Right?
Yep.
Screen.
Nope, here's it.
Pretty nice area to live.
With some fortunate finds up in Larry's shop, we had it all fixed up and got a new chain installed, and it was ready to go just as it started to rain and snow. But we ran long enough to get my dump truck full, and then we just called it a day on account of the weather. It gets miserable really quickly when you're working in wet, cold gloves.
I'm gonna do those last logs on the table and call it good.
Just finishing up. We're gonna call it a day. I got 4 hours out of my 8-hour rental so far, and we've only cut about 2 loads, so it's a little disappointing. Whew. Took something kind of fun and took the fun right out of it. All right, I'll take this back and dump it, and I don't know if I'll stack it up yet tonight or not. We'll see. I didn't unload anything. It kept snowing, and the truck spent the night in the shop to melt off, so. We had a slower start to the morning to let the snow melt off as much as possible because it had gotten warmer overnight. I got to the wood yard and we wanted to swap out the chains one more time before we started the day. And if we could get rolling by 10 o'clock, we should be able to use up the remainder of our 3.5 hours of runtime by 3 or 4 p.m. Now remember, you got to factor in burning some daylight for when the machine isn't actually running. So daylight hours don't always equal hour meter hours. You'd be surprised how much you can shut the thing down and still get some work done. Then we kind of fell into our groove, and when this machine is running properly, it works great. We only used a total of 3 chains for the 8-hour rental period, although we could have changed the last one out sooner and made it 4. So I'd like to figure 1 chain for every 2 hours of operation. And I really liked how quickly the splitter cycles and how high the elevator will go to unload into my truck. All positive things, and you can make a lot of wood in a short amount of time if you keep these few things in mind. Number 1, you have to keep feeding it logs and have a really large supply, like a couple hundred logs, and you'll need someone dedicated to keeping it fed. The straighter and rounder the logs, the better it is, because it's very easy to get logs bound up on the feeding tray if they have little cut-off limb protrusions or any crookedness. The SC-16 can take up to a 20 to 21 inch log, but anything bigger than that, it's at risk of getting hung up unless it's perfectly round. Actually, this thing likes 16-inch round logs. That's like the sweet size. But be prepared to cut off the butt end of those larger logs to eliminate the taper, and you'll have to cut off any of those door nicks, I call them. Those things that, would nick the door jamb if you were trying to carry it into the house. The logs need to be laying flat if you want them to feed properly. And lastly, make sure the logs are clean and mud-free, and that'll help preserve that chain life. If you do these things, these efforts will really help to increase your efficiency time. To get the most from your rental, this needs to be a team effort. Now, if you own this machine, it would be different because you wouldn't be worried about it so much. But to get my money's worth, it takes at least 3 guys to keep this thing moving as efficiently as possible. And then you shut it down to switch out the trucks or catch up with the log piles. But if you count William at home stacking, then there was times I had 6 guys helping me all at once, and we were all busy doing something. Although, depending on your operation, you may not need a cameraman and a drone pilot like I did for much of this, but you get the drift. Obviously, you could do it with fewer guys, but you may not get as much wood cut either. This was good for me, and I'm happy with the outcome. But with that being said, if I'm being totally honest, there are a few things that I'd like to see addressed on this machine. The first is the saw and the feed pressure. It'll occasionally stop mid-cut when you're advancing the bar, and you have to relieve the pressure and start again, like a chopping motion. And most often it'll then proceed to cut right on through. So basically the saw is just not very forgiving, and maybe rightfully so. You can't expect it to cut properly if the conditions aren't ideal, but then again it'll stop and hiccup when you wouldn't expect it to too. So I tried to make some adjustments to the feed pressure, And you can actually turn it up so it pushes harder, but then it'll just stall out the chain. So there's a fine line where it works the best. Secondly, it doesn't do a good job of holding the log for that last cut that you need to make. So in other words, if you got a short piece that you can get 2 bucked logs out of, it's a balancing act sometimes to hold on to that little bit that remains and then cut off the last one. Sometimes you'll have the whole piece tip over and fall into the splitting tray, and that is a pain to get out of there. When you get a piece that's too long to be split and it falls down inside, you've got your work cut out for you, especially if it's a large log. You know, the clamping roller that's in place works pretty good any other time except for on that last cut. So there's room for improvement there. And related to that issue is my biggest complaint with this thing. The bucked logs don't always drop straight into the splitting tray. And this happens a lot, especially on larger, heavier logs where gravity causes the cutoff piece to begin to fall before the chainsaw is all the way through the log. This results in the need to reach into the splitter and reorient the piece so that it can be run through the splitter. On the bigger pieces, this can be really tough. For a shorter guy like me, it's extra tough. It's a real strain on the shoulders and back because the safety guards are too high and I don't have enough ability to reach in there. This thing isn't built for you to be reaching in there either, and if you don't have enough upper body strength to do that multiple times a day, then you will not have a good time trying to be the operator at the controls. I even found that it helped to have a large pry bar handy so that I could reach in there and use it as a lever to get the misaligned pieces into position. The guards and shields that they have in place for safety just make it more difficult to get in there when something doesn't feed correctly. Speaking of getting in there, there are multiple occasions where I had to get up on top of the splitter to address a rogue round that didn't feed properly or something that's caught in the splitter wedge. And there just isn't a step or handhold anywhere to be had to get up in there. Matter of fact, everything to step on is angled and kind of slippery, which makes it kind of unsafe to climb up in there, and you'll have to eventually. Even to remove the safety chain on the elevator for road transport requires someone to get up inside of there to remove it. And there isn't anywhere to put your feet or grab a hold of something to get in. So I'm not trying to come down on Dyna. They make a good machine, but after 3 rentals and having an open mind towards renting this machine, those are my honest observations. Some of those situations could still be operator-induced errors, and we could be to blame for that. I get it. But if it's happened to me, then it could likely happen to you. It's just some things to be mindful of if you're looking to rent or buy one of these machines. And again, if you buy one of these machines, then the stress that I had of trying to hurry and maximize my runtime efficiency wouldn't be as much of an issue for you. We were almost done with our 8-hour rental, and my dad and Uncle Kenny were still hanging around to help me finish up when the machine ran out of fuel. It turns out the previous renter had forgotten to fill it up after their use, and then it hadn't been checked by the rental place, so it didn't quite make it the full 8 hours. I was able to find a bucket and get some fuel in it, and finally we got it going again to finish up our last half hour.
Hope it's not a pain in the butt to get it running again.
Yeah.
For our situation, it takes another entire day to get things all cleaned up and transported back home. These are rounds that were too big or gnarly or had some kind of weirdness to them, and they're not very efficient to take through the firewood processor, so I'm just going to load them up, take them home, and split them with a backhoe. You know, for me, this isn't my wood yard. I'm just fortunate enough to be able to use this place and from a good friend of ours, Larry. So I just got to get things kind of cleaned up and made to look presentable again. It's really interesting. I was watching some of the time-lapse video I had, and this jack handle was cranking itself down over time. I'll show you. See that? See how it was going down? Look how much bark and stuff gets jammed up in here around these hoses. We were trying to keep it clean as we went, but just All right, so this is definitely one of the things I don't like. After just 8 hours of run time, this is completely full of bark and sawdust and debris. All these hoses run right through the thick of it all, like right where it's going to shed all this bark. It's unavoidable. Oh, there's a bolt that's loose. So I guess if I were engineering it, I'd try to make it so that all these hoses and debris weren't subject to so much clutter, because these are bound to just catch everything. Look at that. Debris falls out from behind there and it just fills it up full of stuff. If this is what you get in 8 hours, I can't imagine like just having this thing sitting stationary trying to run it. The whole thing would be full of bark and debris in no time. I gotta get this sawdust out of here. Yeah, I hope this doesn't all blow off of here on the way home. Okay, I got the sawdust trailer home. About halvesy on how much stayed on there, but it's all right. I'm gonna try to get these, I'm gonna take these logs home. And I might take a few more home, but... Oh! We got a little wood for a home game. All right, I'm gonna run this home and then on to the next thing. So would I rent this processor again? For me, the answer is going to be probably not. I think the price is fair, so the money isn't my concern, but mainly it's about the amount of time and manpower needed to operate this thing over a short duration of time. It's beginning to feel too stressful to me to make sure it all happens and that I utilize the 8 hours as best I can. It uses up my week of vacation with my family during the holidays. Yeah, but mostly I think we're all getting just tired of the amount of work it takes over those 2 or 3 days of cutting. It's not a question of whether or not my helpers want to still help me. It's just a matter of if I want to keep asking them to help me. Well, that's as cleaned up as I'm going to get it for now. Things will shape up good once it's dried up. This is just no time to be trying to fix it up. So, but on the positive side of things, you know, I can't leave on a negative note. I believe we did get more done than any of the other years previously. So the splitter does perform well. I mean, it's a beast when it's up and going. Back with 2 more loads. How's it going?
Good.
Are you getting wet yet?
Kinda.
You're almost there, halfway?
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
It's gonna be nice to get it done.
All told, and if my measurements and math are correct, I believe we split a full 11 cords with it in our 8-hour rental. And I'm sure there's more people that can do more and some that can do less. I know there's going to be variety there, but that should be enough for me at least to finish out the rest of the season. So I'm excited about that. But I'm interested in what you think. Do you have any good alternatives for me to generate the wood I would need? My hope is just to get more of it at home and take the smaller batch over a longer period approach. I can make a better effort to get out and cut once a week in the off season. I might need a new one-man splitter too, so I'll be looking into those ideas. I've also been thinking about how IBC totes could help with the amount of handling I do, because right now we're handling it too much, and I recognize that fact. Anyway, I'm glad you clicked on this video. I want to thank you so much for being here, and if I'm lucky, I will see you in the next one. All right, take care.
Eva, I can't do it. Eva, let me go up here where you were. Eva, I bet you $5 again. Okay?
Don't fall off that pile. Your mom will kill me.
Oh, don't worry. I hit my head on the corner.
Okay. Let's not break the stove.
Try it. We won't break the stove. I need to get a good angle. It's cold.
It is cold. You made it! Nice job. All right.
I need it. Oh,
I'm going to run this firewood processor. Let's hope I can get a lot done and don't have any problems.